Welcome to As We Get Older. I'm Laura Ornduff, and in this video I want to talk about visiting someone in the hospital. A lot of what I'm going to talk about could easily apply if you are visiting someone in a nursing facility or maybe they're back home after being in the hospital. But to keep it simple, I'm going to focus on an actual hospital visit. As you watch this video, I want you to remember that I have really two motivations: keeping the patient safe and keeping the patient comfortable. There are a lot of things that people do and they don't realize it, but they are actually putting the patient in danger. They're jeopardizing patient safety, and they could very easily be making the patient uncomfortable. So if I do ruffle a few feathers, I don't mean to. Just please watch the video. I've got 10 things I'm going to cover. They're not everything, but there's plenty more that I'm not going to be covering. But I picked 10 things to cover. Just watch them and listen to the reason why. Number one, ask yourself, should you even visit the person in the hospital? A lot of stuff goes into play on this one. The gravity of the situation, the length of stay, how busy will the patient be? You know, if they've been in a car accident and they're immediately going into surgery, recovery, rehab, and they're only going to be in the hospital for 36 hours, or versus if they're there for 10 days for observation. A lot of things go into play. But just ask yourself, would I be helping or would I be more draining to the patient? Another thing to consider is, after they've been home 3 or 4 days, when they're rested, have a little more energy, that's usually when visitors kind of drop off. That might be a perfect time to visit them. But that's a question only you can answer. I just want you to ask the question. If you decide to go, first thing I want you to do is pick up the phone and talk to someone on the unit, not just the hospital operator, but on the unit, because I want you to ask about restrictions. The first is visitation restrictions. What hours? Is there a cutoff time? Is it open 24 hours? What are the visitation restrictions on the unit? Many hospitals, if you arrive even 2 or 3 minutes after the end of the visitation period, they won't let you in, even if you've driven 2 hours. So just be aware and respect the hospital rules. While you're on the phone, ask if there are any visitation restrictions for the patient themselves. Maybe the patient has said, I only want immediate family only. And if that is what they've requested, honor it. I don't care if you've known the person for 60 years, you're best friends, you vacation all the time together. I don't care if you're a member of the clergy, member of the church, and you're doing visitation rounds. If they have said patient, immediate family only, respect it. If you feel an urgency to visit the patient, contact a family member or contact a nurse on the unit and just say, hey, here's my name. Could you get the message to the family? If they want you to come, they will definitely invite you. But again, out of comfort, do not just knock on the door and walk in past the sign that says immediate family only. Because you are now potentially making the patient very uncomfortable because you're basically ignoring their wishes. While you're on the phone, ask about, number 3, gifts, specifically flowers. There are a lot of diseases, procedures, a variety of things that will not allow the patient to have even cut flowers in the room. Now, the nurses will love you because those flowers will be at the nurse's station. But you've just spent $30, $40 on a huge bunch of flowers that the patient can't even have in the room. Even if the patient can have flowers, flowers take up a lot of room. And if you have been in a patient room recently, there's not much shelf space. So just something, maybe flowers may not be the best option. Another restriction many times is food. So I would ask you to consider, just don't even do food. Just don't bring any kind of food, liquid or food. Just don't do that because so many tests being run, the food eaten can change the results of those tests. And even if the patient has been told what type of tests they're having or the family members knows it, if they don't have a medical background, they may not understand the fact that, hey, they really wanted a croissant for breakfast. Well, that just threw off their blood glucose, or they are going to have a procedure this afternoon. They are supposed to be NPO, and they weren't really paying attention to NPO, which is nothing by mouth. So there are a lot of things that go into the factor with food. Even if they say, hey, could you bring me something? I would clear it with the nurse just to make sure they can have the food. A lot of times you can, but just be very, very careful with food. Another thing that a lot of sites and a lot of people recommend to take as a gift, because again, people need to take gifts, or they want to take gifts, are socks. Now, socks are great. Socks are cute. Let's say I'm in the hospital and I've got a broken elbow, and you bring me some R2-D2 socks. They're cute. They're great. But they're not safe. The reason I say that is if you think about the socks that are given in the hospital, they've got those rubber grips. And so I've got this broken elbow, and 2 o'clock in the morning, because I don't have restrictions about getting in and out of bed, I get out of bed to go to the bathroom. Well, I didn't realize they mopped my floor, an hour ago, and it's still there's still some dampness because it's kind of humid in the room. There's still some dampness. If I'm wearing my R2-D2 socks with no grip, there's potential I'm going down. But if I've got those grips, it's going to help protect me. Patient safety, patient safety, patient safety. One thing that a lot of people don't think about is if you've got someone who has a smartphone and they like different apps, find out if they have an iPhone or an Android and get like a $5 card and just say, hey, here's a gift card, download a couple of apps. Something new and different, or, $20 and download a movie. And the nice thing about that gift card, they put it into their account and they can throw it away, and there's no space taken up in the room, and they've got entertainment. So again, just a little something to think about for the gifts. Number 4, animals and children. Now, when we talk about animals, I'm not talking about service animals. Those animals are working, and the handlers understand the rules and regulations. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your neighbor who wants to see her dog. She's been in the hospital 3 or 4 days, and she truly misses her small little dog. Ask, is it appropriate? Is it okay that you bring that dog to the patient? Because, again, depending on what illness, treatments, that kind of stuff, that could factor in. Is it appropriate for the patient? Is it appropriate for the unit? And does the hospital allow that? And if the hospital allows that, are there any restrictions? Like, the dog has to be carried. The dog can't walk into the hospital. Just find out what, if any, there are restrictions for animals. Now, with children, many times you're bringing a child because you want to bring joy and happiness. It could be you're visiting and you don't have childcare. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why you have children with you. Totally get all of them. But ask, is it appropriate for that unit? Some units in hospitals you've got to either be 8, 12, 14 years old. I mean, there's many times an age limit for some units. So ask before you trudge down to the hospital, and honor and respect them. If you're with the hospitals, let's say you're visiting your grandmother and you have your 3-year-old child, she's having a great time. She's loving seeing her 3-year-old child, but then you want to spend some time talking to your grandmother, so a little bit of quality time. If at all possible, bring another adult, because when you are focused on your grandmother, a 3-year-old is going to be a 3-year-old. I was a 3-year-old. I get it. Bright, shiny, new things. Now, you may look at the hospital bed going, it's not bright and shiny. To a 3-year-old, oh yes it is. They're going to be wanting to touch things and do things and trying to have that quality time with your grandmother, and you're constantly chasing the child. Again, you may need to. You may not have another adult, but if at all possible, see if you can have another adult with you so you can have that quality time with your grandmother. All right. So you are at the hospital. You've walked in the door, you've parked, you've walked what perceives to be 42 miles from the parking lot. You're in the lobby, you're headed toward the elevator. At that point, I want you to pull out your cell phone and, if possible, turn it off. Now, I get you might have your cell phone that you're going to have a video conference with somebody who lives across the country. I get there may be reasons you're going to, or show some pictures. I get that. But if you're not going to use your cell phone, if you can, turn it off, mute it at the very least, and if possible, turn off the vibrate. Because if you're in the patient room and if you're getting a text every 1 to 2 minutes and you're there for a 15-minute call, bzz, 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 bzz. This is really important if you're visiting someone who's maybe older and cell phones have not been part of their life. They may have one, but it's not been part of their world for most of their life. And so that bzz, bzz is going to be very distracting. When you turn off the phone, mute it, whatever, put it in your pocket, put it in your purse, and then I want you to kind of emotionally and psychologically don't think about your phone. Just let it go. Now, you're on the patient floor. I want you to now ask where the guest bathroom is, not the bathroom in the patient room. Where is the guest bathroom? Go in there. You might have heard this before. Wash your hands. Can I stress that enough? Wash your hands. Don't just run your hands under water. Soap and water. Scrub. Rinse. Dry. Not rocket science. But this is where a lot of people drop the ball. When you are leaving the restroom, take a paper towel, wrap it around the door handle, and open it. I have seen so many people, like restaurants everywhere, they wash their hands. They do a really great job, and then grab the door handle. Well, you just negated washing your hands. Patient safety. You want to get rid of as many germs as possible. So, you've washed your hands, you walk into the patient room. At this point, when you knock on the door, you open the door, hi, you can say hi, but the next thing out of your mouth is not, how you doing? You look great. The next thing out of your mouth is this a good time? Now, I just talked to them 45 minutes ago. They said, come on up. They had, they didn't have anything planned for the morning to come on up. Well, during that 45 minutes, maybe they gave the patient some medication, and maybe they're really nauseated, or maybe there's some treatment, or there's a lot of reason that suddenly, unexpectedly, it's not a good time. So this way, you are giving the patient control. Hey, is this a good time? And if the patient hesitates, just say, oh, hey, we could run down to the cafeteria and get something, come back in, 30 minutes. Especially if you walk in the door and the medical team is talking with them. Again, any hesitation, patient comfort. Is this a good time? Now, let's say it is a good time. Patient says, come on in. This is a great time. Just me. I'm so glad, glad to see you. It's been kind of just kind of a boring morning, just waiting for, test results. Thanks so much for coming by. Let's say that you have picked up let's say it's a Saturday morning. You have picked up your neighbor and you're visiting your other neighbor. So there's 3 of you. You walk in, the patient is in the lounge chair and there's another little teeny chair. Well, you're going to be there for a while. So obviously you want to sit somewhere. Do not sit on the bed. Do not sit on the bed. Do not sit on the bed. Now you're going, but I need somewhere to sit. Think about it. And I don't mean to be rude, but where has your backside been? You got in the car. You got in your car. You drove. You pick up your neighbor. Let's say y'all went to breakfast. You stopped at a restaurant. You sat in a chair at a restaurant. You, again, got back in the car. You maybe leaned against the elevator wall. Think how many germs you have picked up on basically your backside. You have now you're sitting on the bed, the nicely clean, very comfortable, it's a pretty comfortable bed. You're sitting there, and in another hour or so, that patient's going to crawl back into bed, pull those sheets up to their mouth. You washed your hands, but you have introduced germs onto their sterile bed from your clothing. So, you get there, you want a place to sit, totally understandable. Step out of the room, ask a nurse, is there a folding chair or something like that? Or, I've seen this many times, the nurse or the CNA will bring a couple of heavy blankets and they will put them over the clean bed to create a barrier. And you can sit on that. That's fine. But do not just plop down on that bed. Because again, you're introducing so many germs. Patient safety, patient safety, patient safety. This next thing, if you remember anything from this video, I beg this be the one you remember. Please be the one you remember. You're talking to the patient, you and your friend, basically the three of you, you're laughing, joking. It is an absolutely wonderful visit. You're probably going to extend longer than you were expecting. You've been there 15 minutes and you're like, oh man, it could be another hour or two. We're having such a great time. Absolutely, you should stay. But there's a knock on the door and somebody with a badge, one of the medical team, doesn't matter who, walks in. What I want you to do immediately is to stand up. You can leave your coat, your purse, your umbrella, whatever. Leave that, but immediately stand up and kind of get your friend to stand up with you. Start walking to the door and say, we'll step out, we'll be in the hall, we'll give you some privacy. We'll be out in the hall. When you're finished, we'll come back in. Now, you may be thinking, well, I do that. I look at the patient and I say, would you like us to leave? Huge difference. When you are sitting there and you remain seated, you look at the patient and just say, oh, would you like us to leave? You're putting the patient in a quandary and potentially uncomfortable because let's say they've been desperate for somebody to visit and they're so happy you're there and you even had to drive 45 minutes to get to the hospital and they're just so grateful. You're giving up your Saturday morning for them. They are loving it and they don't want to do anything to offend you. But the person coming in, let's say it's their nurse, and they need to ask some questions that they don't necessarily feel comfortable asking in front of you. So they're in a quandary. They don't want to offend you and ask you to leave, but they really, really, really want the privacy. So again, do you see how the phrasing can make the patient uncomfortable? By standing up and taking control of the situation and saying, hey, we will step out. We'll come back in when you're finished. That relieves the patient. If the patient wants you to stay, they can absolutely say, oh, no, come on. They're just going to take my blood pressure. It's okay. Come on back in. But you're giving the total control to the patient. You're not making them uncomfortable. I don't care if it is your best friend. It doesn't matter. Take control of the situation. Step out. The patient will keep you there if they want to. So please, it's a subtlety, but a very, very big, important one. The last one is, you would think kind of obvious, but it's a subtlety. Don't complain. When you parked your car and you walked from what perceived to be 42 miles after driving around for 20 minutes trying to find a parking spot, and then only one elevator was working, well, guess what? The patient is not getting good news. All the test results are coming back and they're not getting good news. They really don't need to be your therapist when you're fussing about lack of parking and being there, because it's almost going to come across of, oh, look at all the sacrifices I made for you. And I'm sure you don't mean that. Or if you're complaining about the food, well, maybe the patient's on an NPO diet. Again, NPO means nothing by mouth. Or maybe they have graduated up to lemon jello and ginger ale, and that's their lunch. But yet you're complaining about, the restaurant, the eggs were cold or something. So again, I'm not asking you to be a Pollyanna where everything is just fine. I'm not asking that. It's okay to say, wow, parking was kind of crazy, but I'm so glad to see you. You're looking great. Okay, statement of fact. Parking was bad. But focus on the patient. Just kind of catch yourself. Because again, you may find yourself, if you're talking to them and it comes out, well, then quickly divert it. If you find others in the group, divert them. Divert them. I realize I have given you a lot to think about. And I realize there are so many more things that I could have covered. But I tried to keep this, I know it's been a little bit longer video, but I tried to keep it a little short and simple with 10 items to really focus on, again, patient safety and patient comfort. Because it really, if you think about it, that's why you're there. You're there trying to help the patient. So if you have any questions, I would definitely talk to the hospital, call the hospital, and, again, ask all those questions about restrictions, or if you have like, hey, where do I park? Call the hospital. Ask them where you should park. But again, be there for your loved one, but make sure they're safe and comfortable. So thanks for watching my video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've given you some things to think about. Please check out the other videos in my library and leave a comment, or if there's some other topics you want me to cover, or more issues in this particular topic you want me to cover on a second video. Be happy to do it. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.